The orthopedic surgeon didn't say a word when he handed me that folded slip of paper. He just let it rest against my palm like it weighed nothing. But it did. Check the garage security camera. A minute earlier, he'd been talking about plates and screws, about irrigation and infection risk, about how my wife's tibia had come through her skin like a white knife. An open fracture. A phrase so clinical it almost hides what it really means. Your person is broken in a way you can't unsee. I stared at his note as if it belonged to someone else's life. My wife, Marlene, lay behind the curtain on a gurney that smelled of antiseptic and blood. She was pale, mouth slack from pain medication, eyes fluttering like she was trying to wake up but couldn't find the surface. Her wedding ring was still on. My thumb kept circling it because it was the only solid thing I could hold on to. "Is this about her fall?" I asked. The surgeon's gaze didn't move to Marlene. It moved to me, to my face, like he was measuring what kind of man I was before he pushed me over the edge. "You need to look," he said. That was all. I walked into the family bathroom down the hall because I didn't want my daughter and grandkids to see me shake. I locked the door and pulled my phone out with fingers that wouldn't cooperate. The hospital's fluorescent light made my hands look older than they were. 68 years old. A grandfather. A man who'd built a life that was supposed to be safer than this. The garage camera app loaded slowly, that spinning circle turning like it enjoyed the suspense. When the footage finally appeared, the first thing I saw was my wife's laugh. She was in our garage that morning, hair clipped up, wearing her old gray sweatshirt with paint flecks on the sleeve. She'd been humming while she organized the shelves. It was a stupid domestic sound, the kind you don't appreciate until it's gone. She bent to pick up a plastic bin. Then someone stepped into frame behind her. A man in a baseball cap and hoodie. He moved with certainty, no hesitation, like he'd rehearsed it. He went straight to the metal shelving unit where we kept tool cases and boxes of holiday decorations. His hands gripped the upright support. He rocked it once, twice, hard enough to loosen something. Then he shoved the top shelf forward. The entire unit tipped. It fell like a collapsing wall, a cascade of metal and weight and stored years. Marlene turned too late, eyes wide, arms half raised. The shelf slammed into her side and drove her down. One of the heavy bins struck her leg. I saw her foot twist under her. I saw her mouth open in a silent scream. The man didn't run toward her. He stepped back and watched, head tilted, waiting to see if the job was finished. Then he crouched near the camera, close enough that the lens caught the bottom half of his face as he reached up, as if to adjust the angle or cover it. For a second, his hood shifted, and I saw him, my son, Evan, from my first marriage, my firstborn, 43 years old, a father himself, the boy I taught to drive, the boy I carried on my shoulders at parades, the boy who used to call me when a thunderstorm scared him. That same face, older now, leaner, with the hard set of a jaw that had learned to hate. My throat made a sound I didn't recognize. Something between a sob and a choke. I replayed it. Again. Again. I wanted it to change. I wanted some glitch to blur his features. I wanted to wake up. Instead, every replay sharpened the truth until it felt like glass in my lungs. Someone knocked on the bathroom door. "Dad?" My daughter Lila called softly. "Are you okay?" I swallowed until my throat hurt. "Yeah," I lied, because lying was suddenly the only thing holding the world together. I unlocked the door and walked back into the corridor like a man moving through water. The surgeon was still there. He looked at my face and didn't need me to say anything. "You saw it," he said. I couldn't speak. I just nodded once. He lowered his voice. "She told triage she tripped. She said it fast, too fast, like she'd practiced it. And when we cut her pant leg off, I saw bruising on her ribs that didn't match a simple fall." I asked her again, gently. She wouldn't look at me. He paused, and there was a kind of controlled anger in his calm. I've treated victims who lie because they're terrified of what happens if they tell the truth. Sometimes it's a husband, sometimes it's a caregiver, sometimes it's family. Family. That word hit harder than any accusation. "Why the note?" I managed. "Because if I say it out loud and you react in the room, people hear," he said. "And if the person who did this is listening, you lose your advantage. Keep your face steady. Go home. Then do what you need to do." Behind the curtain, my wife moaned softly in her drugged sleep. My grandsons, Ben and Oliver, were sitting in hard plastic chairs with their hands in their laps, trying to be brave because they were 12 and 8 and thought that was what boys were supposed to do. Lila stood near them, arms crossed tight around herself. Her eyes were red. "They're taking Mom to surgery soon," she said. "The nurse said it'll be a few hours." I stared at my grandsons and thought about that shelving unit falling on Marlene while they were eating cereal at the kitchen table, while I was upstairs folding laundry because retirement had turned my days into small chores and quiet joys. Evan had come to my house and tried to kill my wife in the middle of the morning. And if he'd been willing to do that, there was no line left. I leaned down and kissed Marlene's forehead through the gap in the curtain. Her skin was cool. "I'm here," I whispered, though I wasn't sure it was true anymore. "I'm right here." Then I stepped away before I broke apart. Because whatever happened next, I needed to be dangerous in a way Evan didn't expect. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That's what a younger man might have done. A man who believed outrage was a weapon. Outrage is fuel, but it burns fast and bright and leaves you blind. I needed something colder. In the hospital parking lot, I sat in my truck with the engine off and watched the video one more time. I zoomed in frame by frame until I could see details: the scuffed toe of his boot, the way his right hand hesitated on the shelf's upright, as if checking for the loosened bolt he'd tampered with earlier. I took screenshots. I backed the video up to cloud storage. Then I sent copies to myself 3 different ways: email, external drive, and a private folder Lila couldn't access from the shared family account. Because the first rule, once you learn someone you love can become your enemy, is this: assume they already planned for you to be stupid. I looked at the last time stamp on the camera footage. 9:14 a.m. It was 2:37 p.m. now. For over 5 hours, Evan had been out there with whatever story he planned to tell, whatever mask he planned to wear. Maybe he was already calling, pretending concern. Maybe he was already rehearsing grief. Maybe he was already deciding what to do if Marlene died. My phone buzzed as if answering that thought. Evan's name lit up the screen. I stared at it until the vibrations stopped. Then it buzzed again. I answered on the 3rd ring because silence can be suspicious, and I needed him to believe I was still the same father he could manage. "Dad," he said, voice tight, breathy. "Lila texted me. I'm on my way to the hospital. What happened to Marlene?" He didn't say my wife. He said Marlene. Like she was an accessory I'd bought after my first marriage broke. "She fell in the garage," I said, forcing my voice into something ragged and helpless. "It's bad." "Oh, God," he breathed, and he did it well. He sounded like a man genuinely shaken. Is she going to be okay?" "I don't know," I said. "They're taking her to surgery." A pause. "Did she say what happened? Like, did she trip? Did something fall?" My grip tightened on the steering wheel. He was probing, checking if I'd seen the truth, fishing for what I knew. "I wasn't there," I said, and made my voice crack. "I was upstairs." Another pause. "Dad, listen. Don't blame yourself. Accidents happen." Accidents. I watched Marlene's broken leg again in my mind, the shelf falling like a deliberate sentence. "Yeah," I whispered. "Accidents." "I'll be there in 20, he said quickly. "I'm coming in." "Okay," I said. "Okay." I hung up and sat very still. My heart was doing something strange. Not racing, not pounding, just steady, like it had clicked into a new rhythm. I thought about the last year, all the little frictions I tried to smooth over because I was tired of conflict, Evan asking about my will just to make sure things are in order. Evan complaining that Marlene was changing me. Evan bringing up my late first wife Laura in ways that felt like knives wrapped in nostalgia. I'd convinced myself it was grief, bitterness, old wounds. I'd been wrong. This wasn't bitterness, this was intent. And intent meant planning. If Evan planned this, then he'd planned more than this. I went back inside the hospital and found the surgeon near the nurses' station. "I need to talk to someone about security," I said quietly. He studied me. "Your face changed," he said. "I saw him," I replied. It was Evan. A flicker crossed the surgeon's eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. That chilled me more than anything. "You know him," I said. The surgeon hesitated just long enough to answer without lying. "I've seen him." "Where?" He leaned in, voice low. 2 weeks ago. Here. Different floor. He wasn't a visitor. He was in a maintenance vest, talking to someone from facilities. I noticed because he was watching cameras on a monitor like he understood what he was looking at. My stomach tightened. "He was here before?" "Yes," the surgeon said. "And that's why I wrote the note. Because the injury pattern didn't match a simple fall, and because your wife's fear didn't match an accident, and because I've learned to trust my instincts when something doesn't fit." I nodded slowly. "Who do I talk to?" He didn't answer with a name. He pointed with his chin toward the far end of the hall where a uniformed hospital security officer stood. "Start there," he said. "Quietly. And don't let your son see you do it." I walked down that corridor like my bones had been replaced with wire. The security officer's badge said Ramirez. He was mid-40s, tired eyes, the kind of man who'd seen too many family disasters and too many fluorescent hallways. "I need to report an incident," I said, "and I need you to keep it discreet." He looked at me, then at my hands. They were steady. That seemed to make him take me seriously. "Okay," he said. "What kind of incident?" I showed him my phone. Not the whole video, just the moment Evan's face appeared. Ramirez's jaw tightened. "That's clear," he said. "My wife is in surgery because of this," I said. "I need to know if he's in this building right now, and I need to know if he accessed your camera system." Ramirez exhaled slowly, like he was choosing his next move carefully. "Come with me." He led me into a small office behind the security desk where 2 monitors glowed with feeds from various hallways. He tapped on a keyboard. Camera logs, badge access, elevator records. I watched his face change. "He's here," Ramirez said. My mouth went dry. "Where?" Ramirez pointed at a hallway feed. There was Evan, in his dark jacket, pacing near the surgery waiting area. He was talking to my daughter, hands spread, grief rehearsed in every movement. Lila looked like she might fall over. My grandsons stood behind her, Ben protective and stiff, Oliver clinging to his brother's sleeve. Evan leaned down toward Oliver like he was the gentlest uncle alive. My hands curled into fists. "He's not allowed near them," I said. Ramirez's eyes flicked to mine. "You want him removed?" "I want him watched," I replied. "And I want the police called, but I don't want him to know yet." Ramirez hesitated. "Sir, if you're alleging attempted homicide—" "I'm not alleging," I said. "I'm showing." I turned my phone screen back toward him and played the moment again. Evan rocking the shelf, the shove, the fall. Ramirez made a decision. "Okay," he said. "We'll contact local PD and keep eyes on him. But understand, once police step in, things escalate." "They're already escalated," I said. "He tried to kill my wife." Ramirez nodded once, and I could see it in his eyes. He believed me. He picked up the desk phone and spoke quietly, using words like domestic incident, video evidence, potential threat on site. Then he hung up and looked at me again. "Are you safe going home?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." Because I'd just realized something Evan hadn't considered. He thought the garage was his stage. He didn't realize it was mine. That garage was my territory. 30 years of fixing, building, storing, and maintaining. Every beam, every bolt, every blind spot. And if he was desperate enough to do what he'd done on camera, he'd come back. Not to apologize, to erase, to finish. I walked back to the waiting area and forced myself to look like a man collapsing under grief. Evan spotted me immediately. He moved fast, arms opening, eyes wet, playing the dutiful son. "Dad," he whispered, hugging me tightly. I could smell his cologne, expensive and sharp. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." His embrace wasn't comfort. It was reconnaissance. He was reading my body, checking if I was trembling, if I was furious, if I knew. I let my shoulders sag. I let him feel the weight of a tired old man. "It happened so fast," I said into his shoulder. "I can't stop seeing it." He pulled back, face pinched with sympathy. "It wasn't your fault." I nodded like I needed his reassurance. "The doctor said it was an open fracture. They're worried about infection." Evan's eyes narrowed briefly, then softened again. "She's tough. She'll pull through." Lila was watching him with confusion and pain, like she couldn't reconcile the man comforting us with the man from the video I'd seen. She didn't know yet. I hadn't told her, not because I didn't trust my daughter, because I didn't want her to break in front of him. Not yet. Evan looked at Ben and Oliver and crouched slightly. "Hey guys," he said gently. "You doing okay?" Ben nodded stiffly. Oliver looked like he might cry. Evan's gaze lingered on Oliver an extra heartbeat. Something in his eyes flickered. Calculation. Like he was measuring how fragile my family was. Then he looked back at me. "Dad, do you need me to go to the house? Like to pick up clothes, toiletries, whatever? You shouldn't have to leave here." There it was, the first attempt to get access. "I already grabbed a few things," I lied. "I'm okay." Evan nodded, but his eyes didn't stop moving. "What about the garage? Should we secure it? In case it was like a structural issue? A loose shelf?" Structural issue. He was still trying to make it an accident. "I'll deal with it," I said. Later. Evan's mouth tightened for a second. He covered it with another sympathetic nod. "Okay, of course." Then he leaned in like he was sharing a private thought. "Dad, this is going to sound terrible, but if anything happens, if she doesn't make it, you need to think about yourself too, about not being alone, about planning." Planning. I stared at him and felt something inside me go cold and smooth, like a blade being honed. "I'm not alone," I said softly. "I have my family." He smiled. "You have me." I returned a slow, exhausted nod that made him think he'd won. That night, Marlene came out of surgery alive. The surgeon told us the fracture was severe but repairable. Plates, screws, bone graft, weeks in a cast, months of rehab. He warned about complications, infection, blood clots, nerve damage. But she was alive. When I saw her in recovery, her face waxy with anesthesia, her mouth dry, I leaned close and whispered, "I saw the camera." Her eyelids fluttered, her lips trembled. A tear slipped down her cheek. And that was my confirmation. Not the video, not the surgeon, not the security officer. My wife's tear. She knew. She'd been carrying that terror in her broken body, protecting me from it, protecting our family, because fear makes people do strange, loyal things. I squeezed her hand and spoke low. "You don't have to protect me anymore." Her fingers tightened weakly around mine. 2 hours later, Evan left the hospital. He hugged Lila again. He patted Ben's shoulder. He told Oliver he'd bring him ice cream tomorrow. Then he looked at me and said, "Go home and sleep. I'll check on you in the morning." I watched him walk away, and I realized he wasn't done. He was rearranging pieces. So was I. I drove home alone just after midnight, the roads empty and slick with winter drizzle. The porch light illuminated the front steps. Everything looked normal in the way a trap looks normal until it closes. I didn't go inside first. I went to the garage. The shelving unit was still down, bent metal and scattered bins like the aftermath of a storm. Marlene's blood had dried on the concrete near the corner where her leg had landed. I stood over that spot and felt my hands tremble for the first time since the hospital bathroom. Not from fear, from the image of my wife lying there alone while my son watched. I took a slow breath and forced my mind into motion. If Evan came back, he'd come back for one of 3 reasons. To destroy evidence. The shelf, the bolts, anything that proved tampering. To steal something. Documents. The external hard drive for the cameras. My will. My safe. To create a new narrative. A break-in. A fire. A tragedy that erased the first one. I walked to the workbench and opened the drawer where I kept spare camera parts. I'd installed the system myself years ago after a string of garage burglaries in our neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but reliable. Local storage and cloud backup. 2 cameras in the garage, 1 in the driveway, 1 in the hall. I checked the camera status. All green. Then I checked the cloud backup. Also green. Evan had tried to adjust the camera angle, but he hadn't destroyed it. He hadn't accessed the cloud. That meant he believed he still had time. That meant he was coming back. I went inside and did something I hadn't done in years. I took my old lockbox out of the closet, the one with the papers from my first marriage, the custody documents, the photographs I couldn't throw away even when they hurt. At the bottom was a small black notebook. I hadn't opened it since my working days, back when I was a building inspector for the city. People hear inspector and think clipboard and minor violations. They don't think about what you learn when you walk through buildings after disasters. They don't think about how you learn to see intent in damage. Accidents leave patterns. So does sabotage. I flipped through that notebook and found a name. Detective Rourke. He'd been a young officer on an arson case 20 years ago. A case where a faulty heater turned out to be a deliberate fire. Rourke and I had worked it together because the building's safety reports were mine. I found his number in my contacts, surprisingly still there. I called. It rang twice. Then a gruff voice answered. "Rourke?" "This is Samuel Hart," I said. "You probably don't remember me." A pause. "Building inspector," he said. "The one who caught the missing fire stops." "Yeah," I replied. "I need help. Tonight." Another pause, longer. "What happened?" "My wife is in the hospital with an open fracture," I said, "and I have video of my son causing it." Silence, and then, "Where are you?" "I'm at home," I said, "and I think he's coming back to erase evidence." Rourke didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask what kind of father could say those words. He just said, "Don't confront him alone. I'm on my way." I ended the call and stared at the dark reflection of myself in the living room window. A man my age should have been worried about blood pressure and arthritis. Instead, I was preparing for my son to return like a predator. I made coffee I didn't drink. I turned off every light in the house except the one above the stove, leaving it dim enough to suggest someone had been up and then gone to bed. Then I went back to the garage and set the stage. I didn't move the fallen shelving unit. I didn't clean the blood. I didn't fix anything. I left it exactly as Evan had made it. Because criminals hate unfinished stories. They want closure. They want control. They want the scene rewritten. I placed a small motion-activated camera in the corner behind a stack of paint cans, one Evan wouldn't notice because it wasn't there before. I angled it toward the door. Then I put my phone on silent and tucked it in my shirt pocket with the camera app ready. Finally, I sat in the dark laundry room that overlooked the garage through a narrow window and waited. At 2:16 a.m., headlights swept across my driveway. A car rolled in quietly and cut its engine before it fully stopped. The door opened. A shadow moved. Evan didn't use the front door. He went straight to the garage side entrance, the one only family used. He had a key. Of course he did. I'd given it to him years ago before I understood that love can be weaponized. The lock clicked. The garage door eased open. Evan stepped inside. He didn't turn on the overhead light. He used a small flashlight, the beam tight and controlled. He moved like a man who'd practiced in the dark. His light swept over the fallen shelf, the scattered bins, the dark stain on the floor. For a moment he stood very still. Then he exhaled, low and irritated, like the mess offended him. He approached the shelving unit and knelt. His hands went to the bolts at the base. He pulled a small wrench from his jacket pocket. He was going to fix it, not to make it safe. To remove the evidence of tampering so it looked like a freak collapse. I watched through the narrow window, my breath shallow. Evan loosened one bolt, then paused, head lifting slightly. He was listening. He didn't hear anything because I wasn't moving. Then he went back to work. I could have stepped out then. I could have shouted. I could have dragged him out by his collar and demanded an explanation. But confrontation wasn't the victory I wanted. I wanted something that would hold under daylight. I wanted something that couldn't be talked away by lawyers and family lies. I wanted the truth to stand on its own, clean and undeniable. So I let him keep working. The motion camera recorded. My phone recorded. And then, because Evan couldn't help himself, he gave me the gift I needed. He muttered under his breath, words not meant for anyone else. "She had to go," he whispered. "She had to go before he changed it." Changed it. Not if she died. Before he changed it. My chest tightened like a fist had closed around my heart. It wasn't about a grudge. It wasn't about resentment. It was about inheritance. It was about what Marlene represented. The person who could influence my choices. The person Evan couldn't control. Evan tightened the last bolt and stood. He swept his flashlight upward, checking the camera. He looked straight at it. But it wasn't the one he should have been looking for. He reached up toward the camera housing like he was going to adjust it again, and that's when the garage side door behind him creaked softly. Not me. Another figure stepped in. Detective Rourke. He moved fast, quiet, weapon drawn but pointed down, his voice firm. "Evan Hart, don't move." Evan spun, shock splintering his face into something raw and ugly. For a second I saw the boy he'd been. Then I saw what he'd become. "Who the hell are you?" Evan snapped. Then his eyes flicked to the laundry room window and he realized. He realized I'd been watching, his face twisted. "Dad!" I stepped out of the laundry room and into the garage light like a ghost stepping into its own funeral. "Samuel," Rourke said without looking at me, "stay back." Evan's eyes locked on mine. "You set me up," he hissed. I didn't answer. My voice felt too precious to waste. Rourke stepped closer. "We have you on camera," he said, "and we have you confessing just now." Evan's breath came hard. His gaze flicked around, calculating exits. The big garage door, the side door, the tools, the shelf. Then he did something I'll never forget. He smiled. A small, ugly smile like he'd remembered something I didn't know. "You think this ends me?" he said softly. "You think he's going to believe you? You're old. You're grieving. You're confused. It's easy to make an old man look unstable. The words hit me like a cold hand around my throat. Because he was right. That was the plan. He'd been setting me up as well. A narrative where my stress caused mistakes, where my anger caused accidents, where I became the villain if I fought back. Rourke's voice sharpened. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Evan's eyes flicked to the workbench, to the red gas can beside it, and then, in a flash of movement, he lunged. Not toward the door, toward the can. He grabbed it and yanked the cap off. Rourke swore and moved, but Evan was already swinging the can, sloshing gasoline across the fallen shelf, across the floor, across the dark stain of my wife's blood like he was painting the scene with something that would erase it forever. Stop! I shouted, my voice breaking. Evan's eyes were wild now. If the garage burns, Dad, he said, almost calmly, the camera footage burns. The bolts melt. The story becomes smoke. And your sweet Marlene becomes what she always was to me. He reached into his pocket. A lighter. In that instant, my body moved without permission. I was a grandfather, an old man with stiff knees and a scar on my hip that ached in cold weather. But I was also a man who'd raised 2 children and built a home and learned that sometimes, when the line is crossed, you become something else. I grabbed the nearest thing on the workbench, a heavy rubber mallet, and I swung. I didn't swing for his head. I swung for his hand. The mallet connected with a dull, sickening thud. Evan screamed. The lighter skittered across the floor. The gas can tipped, spilling more fuel. Rourke moved in instantly, pinning Evan, cuffing him as he howled and tried to twist away. I stood there, mallet still in my grip, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. The garage stank of gasoline and old metal and something darker. Rourke looked up at me. You okay? He asked. I stared at my son on the floor, face contorted in rage and pain. No, I said quietly, but I will be. Evan's breathing was ragged. He stared up at me like I was the enemy. She was going to take everything, he spat. She got you. She got you to rewrite it. I saw the papers. My mouth went dry. What papers? He barked a laugh that sounded like a sob. The trust, the new will, all of it, for her daughter, for those kids, not for me. I felt a strange, hollow clarity. A few months ago, I'd quietly met with my lawyer to put assets into a trust for my grandchildren. Not to punish Evan, but because Evan had been making reckless financial decisions, and I didn't trust him to handle the family business responsibly. I hadn't even finalized everything yet. But Evan had been watching. He'd been digging. He'd been inside my life like a thief long before he stepped into my garage. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Evan, he said, you're under arrest for attempted murder and evidence tampering. You have the right to remain silent. Evan didn't listen. His gaze stayed on me. You chose her, he whispered, voice cracking now. You chose her over Mom, over me. And there it was, the real wound. Not money, not paper. A son who never forgave his father for surviving. My first marriage ended in ugly ways I won't dress up. Laura and I were too young, too proud, too sharp-edged. When she left, Evan was 9. He clung to that pain like it was proof of loyalty. Proof that he deserved something the world owed him. Marlene came into our lives years later. She never replaced Laura. She simply made the house warm again. She made me laugh when I'd forgotten how. She held my grandsons when they were born. She packed lunches. She remembered birthdays. She loved us the way steady people love, quietly, consistently, without keeping score. Evan saw that love as theft. I knelt beside him slowly, careful, controlled. You didn't do this because you were hurt, I said, voice low. You did this because you wanted control. And when you couldn't control me, you tried to destroy what I love. His eyes shimmered, but not with remorse, with fury. You made me, he hissed. No, I said. I raised you. You chose this. Rourke hauled him up and walked him out of the garage. Evan twisted his head to keep looking at me until the last second, as if his stare could still pull me back into being the father who would excuse him. The garage door clicked shut behind them, and I realized I was shaking. Not because he'd almost lit my home on fire, because I'd just watched the last thread of my first family snap. The next weeks were a blur of hospital visits and paperwork and quiet terror that settled into the corners of the house like dust. Marlene woke fully 2 days later, lucid enough to speak, and when I told her Evan had been arrested, she didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. I tried to tell you, she whispered. My throat tightened. Why didn't you? Her eyes filled. Because you love him, she said, and I was afraid you'd choose him and hate yourself for it. I took her hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines. I'm choosing you, I said. And I'm choosing the boys, and I'm choosing what's right. She swallowed, eyes closing briefly. He looked at me, she whispered. After it fell, he watched. He didn't help. I thought, this is how people die. On a garage floor, while someone decides if you're worth saving. I leaned down until my forehead touched hers. You're worth saving, I said. You're worth everything. The second hook came a week later, when Rourke called me at 6:12 in the morning. Samuel, he said, we pulled Evan's phone records and financials. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched. The garage still smelled faintly of gasoline no matter how much I cleaned. What did you find? A pause. He wasn't acting alone. My stomach dropped. Rourke continued, voice steady. We found payments to a guy who works facilities at the hospital. He helped Evan get access to maintenance areas and camera blind spots. We also found a series of transfers to an account connected to your former brother-in-law. My mind went cold. Laura's brother, I whispered. Yes, Rourke said. And there's more. Evan has been moving money for months. Small amounts. Testing. He was preparing to drain something. The business, I said, because it was the only thing that made sense. Sterling Auto, the accounts. Rourke exhaled. We think he planned to incapacitate Marlene, claim you were unstable from stress, and get power of attorney. Then he could access everything. My hands tightened around my mug until my knuckles ached. Evan hadn't just tried to kill my wife. He'd been building a cage for me. A cage made of legal documents and planted narratives and old family wounds. Rourke's voice softened slightly. You need to lock things down. Now. Accounts, passwords, legal docs. And Samuel, you need to accept that he might try again from the outside. I stared at my kitchen window, at the driveway where Evan's car had pulled in 1,000 times like it belonged. He's my son, I said, voice hoarse. I know, Rourke replied. That's why he's dangerous. He knows where you're soft. After that call, I stopped pretending this was just a single crime. It was a campaign, and if it was a campaign, then the only way to survive was to cut off resources. I met with my lawyer that day and did what I should have done months ago. I froze everything Evan could touch. The business accounts, the shared family credit line he'd once borrowed from and promised to repay, the old life insurance beneficiary forms he'd been pushing me to update, the spare keys, the access codes. I changed the locks. I installed new cameras. I set up alerts that went to Lila and Ben's phone as well as mine. Legal content is boring until it's the difference between having a home and losing it to someone who thinks your love is currency. Then it becomes survival. But it wasn't enough, because Evan still had one weapon left, people. He used them like tools. 2 days after I locked everything down, my phone lit up with an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said my name like she was tasting it. Samuel Hart, she said. This is Denise Klein. I represent your son, Evan. I felt my jaw tighten. He has a public defender, I said. A pause, then a thin laugh. Not anymore. His mother's family is assisting. Laura's brother. Of course. Denise continued. Evan is deeply concerned about your mental state. There are allegations that you have been acting erratically since your wife's injury. We may need to petition for an evaluation. My blood ran cold. There it was. The cage. I kept my voice calm. My wife's injury was not an accident, I said. There is video. There is an arrest. If you're calling to threaten me, you should reconsider. Denise's tone didn't change. I'm calling to inform you that Evan intends to seek protective measures for his father, you. I don't need protection from my son, I said. You might, she replied smoothly, because grief and guilt can make people unstable. I stared at the kitchen wall where Marlene's favorite photo hung, our grandchildren at the lake, sunburned and laughing. Put your threats in writing, I said, and send them to my lawyer. Denise paused, and I heard something like irritation slip through. Very well, she said. One more thing. Evan claims Marlene has manipulated you. He claims she has been isolating you from your family. She is my family, I said, voice sharpening. Denise inhaled. We'll see what the court says. She hung up. I sat there for a long moment, phone heavy in my hand, and realized Evan was still trying to kill something. Not Marlene this time. My credibility, my stability, my ability to protect my grandchildren. He was trying to paint me as a confused old man who lashed out at his son. And the worst part was, there are people who love stories like that. They love the narrative of the angry elderly father and the wronged child. They love simplifying complicated pain into something easy. Evan was counting on that. So I stopped playing defense. I went on offense, not with fists, not with rage, with truth, set like concrete. Rourke helped me coordinate with the district attorney. We arranged a formal interview with Marlene as soon as she was medically stable. We arranged to subpoena the hospital facility's employee. We pulled logs, emails, text messages, financial transfers. And then, because Evan couldn't resist, he gave us the final piece. From jail, he tried to contact Ben, my 12-year-old grandson. He didn't call me. He didn't call Lila. He targeted the child who'd been watching everything with quiet, terrified eyes since the hospital. Ben came into the kitchen one evening, phone in his hand, face pale. Grandpa, he said, voice tight. Uncle Evan messaged me. My stomach dropped. Show me. Ben handed me his phone. The message read, Tell your grandpa to stop. He's ruining the family. If he doesn't, I'll tell everyone what he did to my mom. I stared at the words until they blurred. Blackmail. Using my late first wife as a weapon. Using my grandson as a messenger. Ben swallowed hard. Did you do something to Grandma Laura? My throat tightened. No, I said firmly. Your Grandma Laura and I hurt each other with words. We made mistakes. But I never hurt her like that. Ben's eyes were wide and shining. Then why would he say that? Because Evan had nothing else left, I thought. Because he was still trying to control the story. I took Ben's phone and forwarded the message to Rourke and my lawyer. Then I sat down across from my grandson and did something I'd avoided for years. I told him the truth in a way a child could carry without being crushed. I loved your Grandma Laura, I said. But we weren't good together. When she left, it hurt Evan. And he never healed. Sometimes people grow up holding pain like a knife. They use it on everyone around them. Ben's lip trembled. Is he going to hurt us? I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. Not if I can stop it, I said. And I meant it. The case moved fast after that. The facility's employee flipped when faced with evidence. He admitted Evan paid him to access camera areas and pull schedules so Evan could time hospital visits. Laura's brother, confronted with transfers, tried to pretend it was innocent help, but the pattern was clear enough that even his lawyer's confidence cracked. Evan's attorney tried to argue it was a misunderstanding, that he'd only been fixing a loose shelf, that he'd been at the house for safety reasons. But then they played the audio from the motion camera. She had to go before he changed it. No amount of legal elegance can scrub that clean. And then came the moment I didn't expect, the plea offer. The district attorney wanted to avoid trial because trials chew families apart and leave children as collateral. They offered Evan a deal if he confessed fully and provided information about the hospital employee and my ex-brother-in-law's involvement. Evan refused, because in his mind, confessing would mean admitting he was the villain. He'd rather burn everything than accept that identity. So we went to court. I sat in the front row with Lila on one side and a photo of Marlene on the other because she couldn't attend in person yet. Ben and Oliver stayed with a friend. I refused to let them breathe courtroom air if I could prevent it. Evan walked in wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right, hair neatly combed, eyes already scanning the room to see who pitied him. When he saw me, his mouth tightened. When he saw Lila, he looked almost offended, like she'd betrayed him by standing beside me. The prosecutor played the garage footage on a large screen. The room went quiet in that particular way people get when they're watching a life fracture. Evan's face stayed controlled at first. Then his jaw twitched when the video showed his hands rocking the shelf. Then his eyes flickered when the footage showed him watching Marlene on the ground. He didn't look remorseful. He looked irritated that his performance had been interrupted by evidence. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't give a speech. I didn't dramatize. I didn't try to win the room. I simply told the truth. I am 68 years old, I said. I am a grandfather. I am a husband. I have made mistakes in my life. But I have never been more certain of anything than this. My son tried to kill my wife. Evan stared at me like he wanted to physically drag the words back into my mouth. I continued. He didn't just injure her. He watched her. He made a choice in that moment to let her suffer. He came back later to erase evidence. He tried to burn my garage down to destroy the truth, and he whispered the reason out loud, because he wanted control of what I was going to change. I paused and felt my throat tighten. I raised him, and I'm standing here admitting that I failed to see what he became. But I will not fail my grandchildren. I will not fail my wife. The judge's face didn't change. Judges train themselves not to. But I saw something shift in his eyes when he looked at Evan. Evan was convicted. Attempted murder, evidence tampering, conspiracy. The sentence was long enough that my grandchildren will be grown men before he has the chance to walk into my garage again. And still, the story didn't end there. Because the most dangerous part of betrayal isn't the courtroom. It's the quiet moments afterward, when you're left with the wreckage of your own bloodline. Marlene came home 3 months later in a wheelchair, her legs still stiff and swollen, her face thinner, her patience frayed from pain and rehab. But she was alive. She could laugh again, even if it came softly. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, hand braced on the counter, staring out the window at the garage. "I keep thinking about that day," she whispered. I stepped behind her and wrapped my arms around her carefully. "So do I." Her voice trembled. He looked at me like I was nothing. I kissed her temple. "You were something," I said. "You were the only thing standing between him and his fantasy." She swallowed. "Do you miss him?" That question is a blade because it demands honesty in both directions. I stared at the window, at the garage where I'd taught Evan to hammer nails, where he'd once built a birdhouse for a school project and painted it blue, proud as if he'd built a cathedral. "I miss who he was," I said quietly, "but I don't miss who he chose to become." Marlene nodded slowly. Good, she whispered. Because I can't carry guilt for him. I carried fear. I'm done carrying anything that belongs to him. That night, I went into my office and did the last thing Evan had been trying to stop. I changed everything, not out of spite, out of clarity. I finalized the trust for my grandchildren. I set the business succession plan so it couldn't be manipulated. I established a college fund for Ben and Oliver that no one could touch. I made Lila my durable power of attorney if anything ever happened to me, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. And I wrote Evan a letter, not to send, to bury, because some words need to exist even if they never reach the person they're meant for. I wrote, You tried to kill my wife because you thought love was theft. You tried to make me a helpless old man because you thought age was weakness. You were wrong about both. And one day, when you are sitting alone with the truth of what you did, I hope you finally understand. I loved you enough to stop you. I folded the letter and locked it away. Then I went into the garage and rebuilt the shelving unit myself. Not because I needed storage, because I needed to stand in the exact place Evan tried to turn into a grave and make it ordinary again. Ben helped me tighten bolts, his small hands steady. Oliver handed me screws and asked questions in that innocent way children have when they're trying to make sense of adults. Is Uncle Evan bad? Oliver asked quietly. I looked at my grandson and chose the truth that wouldn't poison him. Uncle Evan did a bad thing, I said, and he has to face the consequences. Our job is to stay safe and stay kind and not become like that. Ben glanced at me, eyes older than 12. He tried to take Grandma Marlene away. Yes, I said. Ben's jaw set. Then I'm glad you stopped him. So was I. Not because it felt like victory, because it felt like protection. Because there are different kinds of revenge. And the kind that matters most isn't dramatic. It's living. It's watching my wife learn to walk again, step by step, grit and stubbornness carrying her forward. It's hearing my grandsons laugh in the kitchen without flinching at the sound of a garage door. It's waking up every morning and knowing that my home is no longer a stage for someone else's control. Evan wanted to break my family and call it fate. Instead, his choices exposed him. And in exposing him, they taught me the one lesson I wish I'd learned earlier. Love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. Love means protecting what's good, even when the threat shares your blood.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.